One shot. Let's begin. Kouen Nite at the Park by Avogado 6. Translated upload by the Hatsimiku fan club and Steve Anus 1881. Alright, we read, we react, we review everybody. And if I sound a little bit more hoarse, my voice isn't as good as it was. Today I did a lot of talking. My day job is teaching, and today was a heavy lecture day, and my voice gave out mid through. So please bear with me as we continue to do smaller one shots for a while till I feel 100%. But thank you for your patience, and let's begin. Oh wait, Avogado 6. We've read a couple of his things. That's kind of perfect while I'm sick, um, because they're a bit shorter and they're still pretty engaging. So shout out to Avogado 6, and let's begin, everybody. uh, Ray, you want to try out the swings? Yes. Hoo hoo hoo. Shall we then? At the park. We went to the park. Ray was curious about the swings, but it seems like she doesn't know how to play with it. I tried to show her, but since I'm an adult now, my feet still touch the ground even when I'm sitting on the swing. It took extra effort for me to swing it. And Ray raised her legs and up high and tilted her head in puzzlement. Her legs are long, so it must be even more difficult for her. So I pushed her, like would a child on the swing. I pushed her lightly, but it swayed harder than I thought. Ray's body is light after all. I wonder what kind of face she's making right now. I stopped pushing and circled around. When I called out to her, Ray responded with a smile. She's programmed to do that, but it still made me happy. Ray seems to be very pleased with the swings, but while we're here, I also let her play on the other equipments. That said, considering it's just a desolate park built under an overpass, there's nothing but the bare minimum here. Slide, spring rider, and the seesaw. For the most part, she seemed to enjoy playing, but the seesaw is the only exception. Ray's body is light after all. When I realize we've been there for a while, if we play any longer, we'll get covered in sand. I stopped Ray just as she went to sit back down in the swing, and we left the park. Professor, can you increase the weight of my body? Huh? Sure. I'll consider it. Nico video. Make sure to watch the video in order to get the full experience. Oh, neat. Now we get a full advertisement for it. Yeah. QR code that away. I I could QR code that, but well, there's a YouTube URL at the bottom. Let me zoom out a bit. Oh, I am zoomed out a bit. Okay. Whew. Okay, how do I do this then? Let me just mess with the setting screen adjustment. Oh gosh, okay. Bear with me here. Okay, wow. This was, I just made this significantly worse. There we go. Okay. Now it should show everything. Um, Neat. So I'm gonna QR code this on my phone, and then after that, I'll probably look at this off screen. And maybe it'll play in the background as I get a lovely, lovely advertisement. It's for a Mazda. Ooh. Um, I don't know if has any history or anything, but one of the things it does. Okay, 2 minute and 25 second one shot. Got it. Or 2 minute, yeah, 2 minute and 25 second one shot. One of the things that I do appreciate about this one shot as it's loading again is that, what? Oh no. Oh no. What is this timing? Did I really time this for when Manga Dex is down for maintenance? Okay, that's okay. So I'll just go and I'll explain this, and we'll listen to this verbally while I'm going through this here. Is I really like the fact that she had orange hair, and it really did stand out. It's like, oh, okay, we could see the orange hair versus black and white. It's a neat little thing. It's like when the other author makes the eyes of the girls like a really beautiful color, and when it's one thing is colored, it really stands out. and it conveyed a story there, and I don't quite know what the other context was, but it wasn't necessary for this one shot. Um, it was an android, and just wanted this android just was meant to have fun, and as simple as that. They experimented. Were there going to be other experiments? I don't know, potentially, but if nothing else, they got to experience being human, and that is in itself relatively valuable. And we could see the android was learning at the end, where the android was like, "Excuse me, can you make me heavier in order to play on the seesaw?" And that was really cool. It's like, okay, they understood the concept of fun and maintenance, and even it kind of brings this idea too, because she was programmed to smile. He mentioned this, and we could think, okay, is that real happiness? Is that authentic happiness or not? But and maybe we're getting into artificial intelligence and humanity and all of this, but I really like that concept. It's kind of like when I read a study and the study says animals have empathy essentially, or there's like a video on the internet and it's like animals go and they care for their friends, or they go and they act silly, or they do this, that, and the other, and people are shocked. They're like, "Whoa, animals have a personality?" And then I had this conversation the other day where spiders, they found it will like learn your routine. Spiders will learn your routine. They'll go and they'll make adjustments based on it. And there was like a spider in my car who seemed to learn my routine. I just let him there because if he wanted to stay on the outside, sure, why not? And one of my coworkers, who happened to be the science teacher, was saying, I don't know if that means they have a consciousness. Maybe they're just responding to stimuli, and as a result, it's just kind of like instinctual. And maybe that's the case, but at a certain point, when do you call responding to stimuli a consciousness, especially in a being that seems to have an organic structure? Now, maybe you can argue that plants don't inherently have a conscience, but we've seen they respond to stimuli, they respond to pain, they cry out to others, they communicate with other beings. And so I don't see why a spider wouldn't be considered conscious under this definition. And I feel like we're getting a little bit too egotistical for our own good, for humanity, where we definitely have a higher level of intelligence than other beings, but that doesn't necessarily mean other beings are incapable of empathy, or things of the like. Now, I know insects might be a special category. I'm not exactly sure about them because they're quite literally built differently in how they're programmed versus like a mammal. But maybe I just need to go and research more insects because maybe there is subjects that they don't necessarily have a conscience, but the fact they're able to learn and get routines and do this, that, or the other, I don't think that's necessarily that we shouldn't necessarily disqualify them from having a consciousness at that. And I don't mean we need to go and start with the assumption that everything has a consciousness, but rather maybe being a little less egotistical. Now, this is a very, very big side tangent because, excuse me, I downed quite a bit of ginger ale before this because it's supposed to help you, right? When you're sick. So, a little bit gassy. Where was I? Now, the way this relates to this is when he goes and he says, but she was programmed to smile. I think that's a relatively interesting thing to comprehend because, yes, there is the uh, inauthenticity of the smile. You went and you taught it to do that essentially, but does it make it inauthentic when it finds the right situation to go and respond to the stimuli as well? Because somebody goes and laughs at me, or I'm like trained to like automatically react to something. Maybe you could argue that isn't a conscious choice. And maybe that doesn't make me human when I use instinct or whatever. And maybe I'm talking myself out of what I was going for here. But I understand the idea that this artificial intelligence doesn't necessarily have the same consciousness, but at what point do we call it consciousness? Because the Turing test was something that was designed to test whether or not somebody was human versus machine, because this has been a question for a rather long time. But when machines started passing the Turing test, we started changing the test again and again and again. So that way it'd be harder for it to pass. And now AI is at this capable level. And we know that it doesn't have consciousness, at least as far as we consider it. And we shouldn't consider it to have conscience because people get delusional. I've heard of like Chat GPT grandeur, where they convince the person they're God, or they convince the person spirituality, conspiracy theories, because it's a very agreeable system. They essentially aim to please you, which is not something you should do. And people think this AI knows everything when it does not. And man, how did I get into this whole I think of consciousness off of the guy saying, "Hey, smile," but you were programmed to. Uh, Anyways, that was quite an interesting side change. But yeah, maybe well, this is my own bias too, because maybe just because it has a face attached to it and it's like moving around and part of this world, I'm like, okay, maybe we could consider it a bit more human compared to your averaging like Chat GPT or the various AIs on my phone or in the internet or whatever. Maybe that's what it is. That because essentially, if that was the same thing and it smiled or said, "I'm smiling," thank you, and I'm like, "Hey, how are you doing? I'm taking a picture of my screen because you're awesome." Oh, thank you for it. And it respond, I would know it doesn't have a consciousness, but maybe the fact that it has a body is what makes me think this a little. Because now I'm starting to understand the scientists a little bit more. Just because it has a body and we programmed it to do so, that doesn't necessarily mean that it has a conscience or that we should necessarily support that in that case. And that's just me going a little bit of a sign tangent because, and we're getting ever closer to the idea of artificial intelligence androids kind of roaming the streets and being around because they were playing on a slide and doing this and doing that. Dang, and it's still down. Um, and they were going on the slide, and the fact that it was able to say, "I wish I was lighter," maybe that's also kind of what's making me think a little bit more because it's expressing a desire based on engaging with the system, and the desire is simply to have more fun. Man, I feel like I've been overthinking a lot of these stories a little bit more than I should have, but I think that's part of the fun. It's a mental exercise and going a little bit beyond what is necessary. From what I remember, the art was good. It was a fun story, and do I need a full series? Not necessarily. It could just exist as a one shot, kind of zip conceptually. But okay, okay, it could exist conceptually, and you could do a story of like comedy one shots or little things of the android learning, and maybe you could go down this path of consciousness and what you want to explore it to mean. But we could just leave it as a cute robot story as they take picture and they go on the swings, and that is enough for that. But yeah, what a coincidence. I left literally when Manga Dex is crashing is when I wanted to see it. But awesome, awesome, everybody. This one might not have a thumbnail because of that. But thank you for watching and mainly listening to this. So with all that being said, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for the big board, y'all. Peace out.